I am especially pleased and honored to be introducing the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Somaliland, Dr. Mohamed Abdullahi Omar. He and I have had the chance to meet before in Somaliland, I'm pleased to say. And I'm also pleased to say I told him that we, here at IRI, we work in about 55 countries. And we always say there are 4 or 5 that steal your heart. And Somaliland, for me, has become one of them. And the reason is because of the tremendous achievements of Somaliland over these past, especially 10, 12 years, both in terms of economics, in terms of building up their country, and in terms of the politics. I was saying that when you go to Hargeisa Airport, in one of the waiting rooms is a picture, a map, and on the map is a picture of Hargeisa in the mid-1990s, and it looks like Dresden. And today you are hard-pressed to find any evidence that there was ever any fighting in Hargeisa. Everything has been completely rebuilt. The economy is moving ahead, mainly agricultural, but they're doing a very fine job. What impressed us most, being in the democracy business, was the conduct of the elections. Amongst many other things that we praised was a program to involve college kids in the elections. The University of Hargeisa and other universities had mainly young women, I have to say, at almost every polling place. And in many places, they were the chairs of the polling places. And they were very conscientious on election day, especially at turning away those who were trying to vote, young people, very young people. Who really should not have been voting, but that was quite something to see. Most impressive, and Peter remarked upon this, Peter Pham, was after the election how orderly the transfer of power from an incumbent to a challenger was. And that is something that we at IRI wish we saw in many, many more countries. So we at IRI have become big fans of Somaliland. We, as I said, are very honored to welcome the foreign minister here. Peter Pham, who's an old friend of IRI, is going to do the formal introduction. Peter comes to us from the Atlantic Council, where he is head of their new Center on Africa. Previously, he was with the National Committee on American Foreign Policy in New York. He's also taught at the Nelson Institute at James Madison University and served, I'm pleased to say, as a senior advisor on Africa to Senator John McCain's campaign in 2008. He is a much published writer, as you all no doubt know, and he also serves on the advisory group of AFRICOM. Peter, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Lauren, for the introduction, and thank you to IRI for not only hosting this forum for the foreign minister of the Republic of Somaliland, but really for the long-term engagement that IRI has done in Somaliland with help to the political parties, monitoring the presidential and legislative elections, and then, of course, the presidential election last year that I was privileged to be part of the IRI team observing. If I can permit a word, since I don't speak for IRI, a little partisan commentary. In addition to the wonderful transition that Somaliland has given us, I think we ought to start sending congressional delegations to Somaliland to learn about fiscal policy. The administration that the foreign minister serves in actually proved that you can triple government revenue by slashing by more than half the percentage of the income tax. They cut it from 28% down to 12% and tripled their collections and now provide universal free elementary education for students. So maybe there's something to be learned in that as well. But it's a real pleasure to just introduce Mohamed Abdullahi Omar, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for Somaliland. He was appointed last July after Ahmed Mohamed Solano of the Peace, Unity and Development, the Comia Party, was elected president in that country's election. Dr. Omar was previously the foreign affairs advisor to the Comia Party for several years, where he articulated its foreign policy strategy. He's a graduate of the University of Nottingham with an MA in Urban Policy and earned his PhD from the University of Birmingham. He's taught at the University of Brunel in the UK, as well as the Institute for Education at the University of London. Prior to his work in the politics of Somaliland, he was also a senior education policy advisor to the Birmingham City Council. He's published on a wide variety of topics, including democracy, current events, strategic relations, and presented a number of papers. And I think it's a real treat and an honor for us to hear him on the latest developments in Somaliland, as well as in that critical region of the Horn. Minister.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that introduction. It is a great pleasure for me as a foreign minister of the government of Somaliland to be here today and to speak to such a distinguished guests. I'm not going to bore you about a lot of historical and political process for Somaliland. I'm aware a lot of you are well informed about the history of Somaliland. But what I want to highlight in a few minutes is about Somaliland's progress, Somaliland's challenges, and Somaliland's views about the way forward for us and also for the region, because we are a part of a broader region that is in turmoil at the moment. Somaliland has a functioning democracy. We have, as you are all aware, a government that has been directly elected by the people of Somaliland. We have a parliament that is elected and kept accountable by the people of Somaliland. In fact, we have had a couple of successful elections, parliamentary elections, presidential elections, and local council elections. But we also have had a peaceful transfer of power from a losing party to a winning party. And I wanted to give here a tribute to the previous government of Somaliland for the way in which they have handed over power to my party, who won elections last year. That's a credit to the people of Somaliland, and that's a consistent pattern in the political behavior of the people of Somaliland. The question is, what made Somaliland so distinctive from Somalia in the way that the Somali political affairs have been played out over the last two decades? I think one of the key issues here are the SNM, the former Somali national movement that has liberated Somaliland from the former regime of Siad Barre, has been very effective and very clear about their ideas. And when the former Somali state collapsed in 1991, SNM was clearly the leaders in Somaliland. And they have been able to manage the aspirations of the people of Somaliland and deliver on a number of important objectives they had. But that was not possible in Somalia. When the former regime left and has been defeated, there were too many groups in Somalia. And there wasn't a clear victor in Somali political affairs. You had a number of competing political groups, often armed groups, and they were unable to manage their differences, and there wasn't a clear winner. And then you have, from there, Somalia has never been stable. You have warlords after that who were running the affairs in Somalia. And now you have got radical groups, Islamists, Al-Shabaab, that have full control of the bulk of Somalia. Unfortunately, Somalia has never had a stable period of time for the last 20 years. I think one of the key issues that made Somaliland to succeed is, apart from having one political group, SNM, is also the idea that Somalilanders want to have form a state nation, a nation state. We were all united to have our own nation state. we were all committed to that broader, to that objective and goal that we all subscribe to. Having a well-defined goal helps for people to be united and to work together. That was another issue which made Somaliland become peaceful and stable and democratic. But also the approach we have taken for our conflict resolution and peace building and state building was a bottom-up approach, whereby people had equal access to that process from 1991 up till now. And that bottom-up approach, which involves a less international involvement, has actually been very helpful for the people of Somaliland. But in Somalia, the peace process has been, and I think to some extent it still is, a product of an international ideas, international interventions, international views. And the political class in Mogadishu has been negatively rewarded for quite a long time. They have been allowed to continue with their administration despite the fact that actually they haven't delivered. I'll give you an example. That current TFG was formed in Kenya in 2004. That's more than 6 years. One of the key tasks they have been given was to deliver what the international community described as transitional tasks. And one of the main tasks was to engage a reconciliation process among all the political stakeholders in Somalia. They haven't achieved that task up until now. Another task was to draft a constitution that is acceptable to all Somalis. That's not been achieved. Another task was to have, at the end of the transition, which was meant to be 4 years, to have an elected government at the end of that process. We are now more than 6 years, and Somalia is far from having a democratic reform, political parties, and elections. Yet the international community kept rewarding the TFG. They just had another year of extension. And this time, the international community has become very tough and become very vocal and very critical of the TFG. And they want TFG to deliver all those tasks that was expecting of them over 6 years to deliver in 10 or 11 months. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's achievable either. But it shows you that there is no vision, there is no ideas, and there is no commitment from the Somali political actors in moving the Somali question forward. But that's the distinction. And I just talked about what made Somaliland possible. I think it's the idea of forming a nation state, the idea that they want to behave as a country, act as a country, and work as a country has been demonstrated over and over by having a free and fair elections, by broadening the political space for people of Somaliland, and by working with the international community on a number of issues. Another subject I want to touch upon is the role that Somaliland government takes in the regional and international affairs. Somaliland is a part of solution when you talk about the war on terror. We have been very active in fighting against terrorists. Al-Shabaab has indeed attacked Somaliland a couple of times. The last time was in 2008, October 2008, when Somaliland's presidential palace and a number of key foreign offices in Hargeisa has been attacked by terrorists, and a lot of people have lost their lives. The reason why Somaliland has been attacked and is still under threat from Al-Shabaab is mainly because the values that we stand for, the values of democracy, equality, and the rule of law. Al-Shabaab and other terrorists do not think democracy is the best way to manage a country. They actually think it's an alien values that we, Somaliland, as predominantly a Muslim country, shouldn't actually adopt. But our people, our government, and our community are fully committed to promoting democracy. And I'm glad that IRA has witnessed that democratic reform. And it was a pleasure to have you in Somaliland during our elections, but also and many other times working with us in promoting democracy, but also providing vital services for our people. Another reason why we have been attacked is because of the relationship we have with the democratic states, like the United States of government, other peace-loving nations on the earth, and the Somaliland's ambition to become a nation state that is taking an important role in the war against piracy, war against terror, hasn't been welcomed by terrorists in the region. One of the key developments for the last year since this government is the idea of linking up with the international community much more effectively than we have ever done before. We have adopted what we call a pragmatic foreign policy, which in a nutshell sets out that yes, recognition is and will always remain a goal for the people of Somaliland. My government is committed working on that and trying to convince many members of the international community to recognize politically government and the people of Somaliland. But we also adding other foreign policy objectives on table. Foreign policy recognition is a key and a goal, but we want to cooperate and work with the international community on a range of issues. On economic development, for example. We think if we can deliver, if we can create jobs and opportunities for our young people, for our people, that will consolidate our governance. It will help our sustainability as a government. And that is going to make us sustainable. That will help us to sustain the achievements that we have made so far. Achievements in democracy, achievements in peace and stability, rule of law, development of the private sector and the civil society. These are vital achievements that Somaliland have achieved by and large on our own. We need to sustain those. That's our priority. And in order to sustain those achievements, we need to cooperate much more effective and imaginative in a way that we have never done before with the international community. So yes, we will be seeking for recognition, but that will not stop us working effectively with the international community, Britain, UK, EU, Arab states and African countries, because we have a key interest in sustaining those achievements. For that matter, our current government is actively looking for international investment. I have, as a part of a broader team led by our president, have been to Hong Kong, China recently. One of the reasons we went there is to see whether we can have an economic development cooperation with China. We were looking for opportunities where we could have an investment in our infrastructure, roads, hospitals, ports, those key elements which we hope will provide us jobs and provide us security and provide us wealth is our priority. We're also working with the West in the war against terror, because we think that's a common interest for us and for the other people. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve the objectives that we have achieved. We also work with the international community on the war against piracy. Piracy has been very active in the region that we are part of. I have to say that Somaliland has taken a key role in the fight against piracy. We have arrested as many as 90 pirates who have been committing an act of pirate crimes in our international territorial waters. And they are currently serving prison sentences, most of them in Somaliland. This is unique in a context where piracy is actually involved in the economic means of Somalia, particularly regions of Somalia like Puntland. But we have able to deny pirates to have bases on the ground in Somaliland. And we think that's the most effective way of dealing with piracy, is to deny them to have bases, let alone their economy to be integrated with the normal economy. And that's something which we have achieved, and something we are calling on for Somalia, and in particular Puntland too, because that's where the bulk of pirates come. In fact, all the 90 pirates, none is from Somaliland who are in prisons. All are mainly from Puntland region, but other regions of Somalia too. So we are calling on Somalia to be more effective and to deny pirates and the pirate activities on the ground in their territory. The dual track approach introduced by the United States government has offered us given us a new opportunity. This has meant that the international community will, of course, focus on Somalia because of the problems that Somalia presents. But that will not stop, according to dual track policy, working with Somaliland. In other words, rewarding positive progress, democracy, peace, and stability. So that's a policy which we embrace, and we welcome that policy. But we would like that policy to become a more clearer and more concrete in relation to what we could expect in Somaliland from the United States government and from other friendly governments that is increasingly applying that dual track approach. But I have to mention here, and we are very pleased with that, that for the last year, the international engagement have increased to Somaliland. We have had a number of high-profile visitors and visitors from the West, including ministers, foreign ministers, international development ministers, people from Britain, Denmark, Norway. We have had a high-level delegation from USAID in Somaliland in a way that we never had before. So we think that dual-track policy has already started delivering. We want to have more substance of that in terms of increased development aid, increased cooperation in the fight against piracy, increased assistance in the fight and cooperation in the fight against terrorism. And we would also like to be supported to access international and regional forums where security and political issues that affect us are being discussed. I know the Security Council gets a regular report on Somalia. We would like for the UN Security Council to get regular reports about Somaliland too, because we present an alternative and we present a positive contribution to the region, and we would like to Somaliland to be reported on a regular basis at the UN Security Council briefings. A final thought about our view about Somalia. We have an interest in stable Somalia and secure Somalia. After all, that's where the majority of insecurity in our country comes from. Piracy comes from Somalia to us. Problem is caused by pirates. Terrorism and Al-Shabaab and all that stuff originates mainly from Somalia, and we are being affected by that problem. So we have a key interest in bringing security and stability back into Somalia, and therefore we are very supportive of the efforts by the international community with that regard. But we think the approach has been too long from a top down. I think the international community should make the TFG accountable for what they are doing for the people of Somalia. But we are very supportive about that approach. We think that Somaliland has a role to play in bringing peace and stability, and therefore we would like to be given an opportunity to express our views, to share our experience of state building and peace building and reconciliation in regional and international forums. You have what international community call ICG conferences, international contact groups. I know that those conferences has not been very effective in terms of delivering peace and stability, but Somaliland can provide can share experience. It is own experience in forums like that, and therefore we would like to be able to access those forums in order to be to play an active role in the regional affairs that affect us. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm quite happy to take on questions afterwards. Thank you.
Before opening it up to questions, I'm sure there are going to be quite a number of questions, especially on current events and the quest for recognition. If I can exercise the moderator's prerogative to ask a first question that looks a little bit backward, because I think looking at where you've come from and the decisions that Somaliland's leaders have made, one really has to acknowledge that some of them were visionary decisions that contain lessons learned, I think, for other transitions. I think understated, I think, was the decision of the Somali national movement to put itself out of business rather than continue as a governing party, which is unprecedented in the African context, where part of the problem is revolutionary liberation movements that become ruling parties that don't want to go off the scene. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision process, because you were involved, and certainly President Solano, how you made these decisions which seemed haphazard at the time, but now are paying very rich dividends in the political culture?
That's absolutely good question. The SNM, the SNM, the Somali National Movement, the main purpose for the SNM was to free the people of Somaliland. The purpose was not to get offices for them, to lead the country or to compete power. The primary preoccupation was to free the people of Somaliland from the former regime of Siad Barre, because they felt that the citizens in Somaliland have been treated as a second citizens. They have not been given an equal access to natural resources, equal access to education, health, and wealth. And therefore, they think they have accomplished their job once they have freed the people of Somaliland. And they have opened the political space for everyone to participate and to think with them about how to go forward. And one of the key, Peter is absolutely right, important decisions they made was to relinquish power to another group that was seen as to be more inclusive in terms of the different constituencies in Somaliland, but also to have the courage and the leadership that the people of Somaliland required at that time. And that decision will remain historic in the history. The current president, Mohamed was the longest leader of the leader with the longest period during the SNM, and he was leading that process, and he was one of the key influential people who have made those decisions to be possible. Those decisions to be made at the time in 1991.
The minister will now take questions. If you would, I think there are microphones. If you would identify yourself and when you introduce your question.
Welcome, Minister. Tony Carroll, Manchester Trade, and I'm an adjunct faculty member at Johns Hopkins University. I'm wondering, what do the Africa Union leadership or members tell you? I think with perhaps one of the unforeseen consequences of the departure of both Thabo Mbeki and President Obasanjo in Nigeria, it seems that two of the most prominent African leaders who were inclined to have a serious discussion about independent Somaliland are no longer on the continent's political scene. So I'm wondering if you are getting much receptivity from African Union leadership, other African heads of state, on the issue of sovereignty. Just wondering if that conversation has changed within the last 2 years.
I certainly hope that the attitude of the African Union would change in the next year or two or whatever. More so because of the Southern Sudan case, which has become independent this year and has been well embraced by African countries. We think that will, even though the case of South Sudan is not the same case as Somaliland.
You have a stronger case than
But absolutely, we have a very stronger case than South Sudan. We had our own independence. We have been an independent state before. We're not talking about secession in Somaliland. We're talking about a dissolution of a union that we went on a voluntary basis, a union which we don't think it was actually rectified legally. So it is not a legal case that is taking us back or stopping us from having a recognition. It is actually a political will. And political decisions are made by member states, not the African Union as an institution. So we hope that given our consistency in peace building and stability and democracy, given our current economic position that we are attracting international investment, given that the dual track approach and other approach are giving us an access to the international community, we hope we will be able to convince African states to realize realize that it is actually in the benefit of the region and Africa that Somaliland gets its international recognition. We hope that South Africa, that has been a friendly country, I would call them, to Somaliland, will continue to do so. But we also have got other friends. Somaliland is not actually isolated. We have many friends in the world, in Africa, in America and Europe, and we count on those friends, and we think that one day the Somaliland government and people will hear a positive response in relation to recognition.
Dr. Murphy.
Martin Murphy from the Atlantic Council. Foreign Minister, thank you very much for your remarks. Could you brief us on what the position is now in the border dispute with Puntland? What is going on, and how you envisage that dispute being resolved? And also, what are your fears about that as that area as a haven for disruptive actors?
The issue between Somaliland and Puntland is about people who ethnically or in terms of clan related to the Puntland, but they live traditionally in Somaliland. So we're talking about a district that is within Somaliland, but it's inhabited by people who ethnically related to Puntland people. That's the basis of the issue. Puntland, we can understand that Puntland wants for those people to be treated well, to be integrated into the system, which is what Somaliland wants. But we have been engaging with those communities in those regions, and the President Silayo has offered a peaceful reconciliation process for the people, and they have been engaging well with our government, and as a result of that, like the conference of Woodward, which was this year, has provided a lot of opportunity for people on both sides to discuss about resolving those issues in a peaceful way. We don't actually think Puntland and Somaliland will go into war on that issue. We really don't think, and definitely that's not the intention of my government. We think we can resolve those issues peacefully. It is about people who are part of Somaliland, but ethnically related to Puntland. We think we have people in Ethiopia who are ethnically related to us, and we have people who live in Kenya that are ethnically related to Somaliland. We're not laying claims on those territories, and we think that Puntland will realize that they will not. It will not be wise for them to lay a claim on part of Somaliland. But we are happy to discuss with them on if there are any other issues, because we can cooperate on security, on lack of security. We can cooperate on piracy. There are so many other issues we can talk and discuss. But there is another dimension to this problem, which is about a group called SSE. This is a group of mainly from the diaspora, and in fact mainly from the United States of America, who are actually having a cause for concern for both of us, for Puntland and Somaliland, but also increasingly for Ethiopia. We think this group have links with the radical groups in the region. They have been bringing weapons and arms into the border between Puntland and Somaliland, and they have been attacking and killing some citizens in the region. And we are currently cooperating with a number of other governments in the region in order to have a common approach of dealing with SSE. So these things are distinctive. We are engaged in a peaceful negotiation with Puntland on any issues they feel that needs to be discussed. We are talking with our people in our country that feel that ethnically related to the Puntland. But we don't want to talk to the SSE. We want to cooperate with other countries in a way that we can effectively eliminate or reduce the risk that they are posing currently to us.
Mr. Minister, thanks for being here. My name is Maureen Farrell. I'm with Booz Allen Hamilton, but I'm doing research on behalf of U.S. Africa Command. My question to you is regarding your comment about Somaliland's many international partners. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about some of the international cooperation in the security sector. If your friends in the Arab League, perhaps in Europe and the UK, are possibly providing military assistance. Thank you.
I think you would know that there is an arms embargo on the region, which involves also Somaliland. I know there has been violations of that UN security resolution, but because of that, Somaliland has not been able to build or train or develop the security sector, particularly the military. So that's a problem for us, because we want to be better prepared to defend ourselves against piracy, better prepare ourselves against, or defend, I would say, against international terrorists that are actively trying to attack us. But because of the UN security resolution, which bans arms embargo in the region, we are not able to become an active partner in the fight against terrorism, in the fight against piracy. But for police training, we have been increasingly being supported by a number of countries, which we consider as friendly countries, including Britain. We have been able to train our police and our coastal guards that have been very effective in defending ourselves from pirates. So we have America and Britain and other countries are our useful partners in the security sector. We share intelligence information about terrorism. We jointly undertake operations against terrorism in the region. So we have partners, but unfortunately we are not able to develop our security service as well as we wanted because of that UN Security Council resolution. But we are working on getting some relief of that with the help of some friendly countries. Yes.
During the current crisis that's going on, especially in South Central with the famine, how has Somaliland 1 fared in the overall crisis, and what has Somaliland done in helping alleviate any of the issues that are going on? Is it possible? Is there any cooperation with the TFG or other aid agencies, or is there a massive influx of refugees into Somaliland? I'm just wondering what from your perspective, how Somaliland is being impacted by this and what you're doing about it.
Somaliland has been affected by the drought, because this was a regional famine. It is not only limited to Somalia, and as a result of that, a lot of people are suffering. In fact, this week we produced a report which clearly states that around 1 million people in Somaliland, and mainly nomadic people and farmers, have lost their livestock, and as a result of that, they are at risk of becoming victims of drought and famine. But what makes a different Somaliland from Somalia in the way we manage drought, because there has been a lot of more people who have died in Somalia from droughts than in Somaliland, much more people. I think what made is the governance. We have been able to, and we are still able to work with the aid agencies to reach out those people that have been affected by the drought, even though we still have to get more assistance. But the assistance that my government has been able to deliver have actually reached the places where we need to reach. In Somalia, the TFG, unfortunately, is in the grip of Al-Shabaab, because Al-Shabaab controls the most of Somalia, and they resisted to allowing international aid agencies to provide humanitarian assistance to the people who need in Somalia. And that's why a lot of people died before aid reached them. So that's the difference. But we have been affected, and we are actually sending appeals to the international community for assistance, for humanitarian assistance to Somaliland, because we think there has been too much focus, and rightly so, on Somalia, even in relation to the famine. But the people of Somaliland have been affected too, and we expect that the USAID and other development agencies, international humanitarian agencies, would provide an emergency and humanitarian assistance to Somaliland in order to reduce the risk posed by the drought on many Somalilanders.
Hi, thank you for being here today. My name is Julie Mancuso. I work for the Center for International Private Enterprise. You've mentioned a little bit about your kind of growth strategy for seeking foreign investment. I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit more about internally what's happening on the ground with the local private sector and opportunities there, whether it be with the Chamber of Commerce's or SMEs, what sort of the growth strategy is internally. Thank you.
Thanks. The FDI, the foreign direct investment, is what we are looking for. But we're also interested to have international companies and governments that are willing to invest basically in our natural resources. So we will have we will add added value to those resources, and then provide jobs and wealth for our government and for our people. So we are constantly welcoming anyone who is interested in investing in Somaliland. I understand in the current climate of lack of recognition, a lot of people do not feel comfortable in investing. But what we are telling those investors is that Somaliland's stability and security over the last 20 years should be taken into consideration for a future investment. And we have an investment policy and investment laws which would provide a lucrative opportunities for investors, including tax reliefs, but also encouraging investors to invest in natural resources, which will provide a win-win situation over the long term for all partners involved. In relation to the private sector, that's what's working for Somaliland most. The government is small. We have opted for a small government and a big private sector and civil society. One of the main employers in my country are the public sector, the private sector, particularly the business. The telecommunication sector employs a lot of people in Somaliland, and we have one of the most cheapest telecommunication services in the region. Another area is the financial sector, which is mainly privatized, except the central bank, which has a supervisory responsibility. So yes, the private sector is booming in Somaliland. Somaliland's reconstruction has mainly been done by the private sector, and our diaspora in the United States of America, in Britain, in many other European and Arab states have heavily invested in our country. So yes, the private sector is working for us, and that provides an opportunity to link up with international investors.
Mr. Minister, Dan Fisk with IRI. Again, thank you for joining us and being here. It would seem to me that under the standards of customary international law, Somaliland meets the standards of statehood, of sovereignty. Would you again go through your understanding of what you've been told by the U.S. government, why the U.S. government is not recognizing Somaliland as an independent state?
I fully agree with you. Somaliland satisfies all the conditions and criteria you would think as being a criteria for a statehood. We have a permanent population. We have around coming up 4 million people. There are more than 6-7 African countries that have got less population than Somaliland. We have a territory, a permanent territory that's much greater than half a dozen of African states, including our neighbor Djibouti and many other states. We have potentially economic sustainability for our country. In fact, we provide opportunity for a global or regional economic facilities like Berbera port, which can serve for Ethiopia, 85 million people, landlocked, with a very ambitious development and economic plan. Actively looking for a port we can provide, and therefore we can act and be a bridge for economic development for the whole region. All sorts of reasons why Somaliland should be recognized are there. Don't forget about the stability we provide in the region, the democratic values and systems we have, which is all what the United States bridges and other Western countries also would like to see happening in many developing countries. The official reason that's often provided by, or an argument, if you like, provided by the West, not necessarily only the United States of America, is that the issue of recognition is actually for the African Union or African states, if you like, to take on. We can understand that Somaliland is part of Africa, and the African Union should have an opinion on our situation. But we see the hypocrisy there. We have seen many examples where Western countries, including USA, have taken an active role in embracing new nation states. South Sudan is one of those countries. In fact, the African Union opposed actively to the independence of South Sudan. It is other countries that have promoted the idea of South Sudan, which we supported it. It is a self-determination of the people of Southern Sudan that have been respected. And we think that our self-determination should also be respected by America, by other peace-loving and democracy-loving countries. We think that there is a lot of things that America and other countries can do, and we are talking. We're still talking to the government of America and other governments, and trying to convince our argument. Thank you.
Can I go follow up?
Sure. Yeah.
Ms. Minister, just probably a follow-up though.
Please.
What is, from your perspective, the downside, or is there a downside should the United States or another Western country, in other words, not an African country, be the first or one of the first to recognize Somaliland? In the end, does it make any difference? Don't you just need someone to recognize you?
Honestly, I can't think of any downside for the United States government's decision to recognize Somaliland. I think that will be an encouraging, that will send a clear message out there to the international community, to Somalia, to everyone, that the United States cares about good behavior, cares about stability and peace, cares about democracy, cares about the people who are committed to the war against terror, which is a common international problem. And I think that other countries will follow suit. I think South Sudan has been supported by big countries, and there wasn't any downside I can think of. A lot of African states came to the inauguration of South Sudan's independence on the 7th of July. My president and myself have had the privilege of witnessing that historic moment in South Sudan, and I have to say a lot of visitors have embraced us, and they welcomed us, and they were wishing us that they wish us that we were going to be the next country. Our flag has been raised, which we're very happy with that for the first time in a country that's not Somaliland. That shows the attitude of African states, and some other countries have moved on. I can't think of any downside. I think there will be only positive results of that decision.
Minister Omar, Steve Evans from the Marine Corps University Press. Just a quick question on, well, first a comment. I don't think the United States or the UK should wait for the AU. I mean, we've been polite. They've had their chance. If they didn't want to avail themselves of it, then we should just go ahead and recognize you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the recent deal that Somaliland effected with China in regard to the improving the port of Berbera?
Yes, certainly. This specific initiative was as a result of an approach we have received from a Chinese investor. That Chinese investor has struck a deal with the Ethiopian government about producing natural gas, and they start thinking about, because Ethiopia is a landlocked country, they wanted to have a port where those resources can be exported internationally. They also needed a factory which can transform a natural gas into a liquid gas, which will be an end product for export. And Berbera is the closest port to Ethiopia. At the moment, Ethiopian government and Ethiopian business community make use of Djibouti port, which I think they will continue because it's a massive country. They have a very ambitious development plan. Ethiopia wants to become a middle income in 10 years' time. That's their ambition. I think they would need more ports, Djibouti, Somaliland, and other ports. And then the Chinese have approached us and they want us to see whether we can accommodate for that purpose. And we started talking to them. So there is no deal done yet. We started, this is an initial talks about how we can make a deal. So we went to China and we have started talking about them. Obviously, we will be thinking about the financial terms, the legal terms, the technical aspects. We are taking all those advice at the moment, but we are interested in embracing international investments, whether it comes from China or from the US or from Arab states. It doesn't matter. We want to have an international investors interested in our country. That will help us to provide jobs. That will help us to take our profile higher than it is now. And we think it will encourage other investors and other people to come to Somaliland. So yes, we are excited about that process, and we hope that will produce some good results.
Let me just comment on something. This is virtually the same response the U.S. government gave when Minister Samater came here in 1992 to talk to Hank Cohen, the State Department, about the issue of recognition. Part of the reason that I wrote that article was because I didn't think our arguments were getting an audience. It's unfortunate that the State Department hasn't moved appreciably beyond a point of 20 years ago, virtually, on this position, and I'm sad that we haven't had more success in getting the State Department to be bolder on the recognition issue. I think there is an important difference between South Sudan and Sudan because it was the Comprehensive Peace Agreement process. And one of the arguments that works against you is there's nothing there on the other side to negotiate with. That if two willing and able partners were able to negotiate a dissolution of their union, then nobody would have a problem with that. The problem is there's nothing to negotiate with on the other side. Item 3 that I worry about, in fact, on my way over here, I had a word with David Shin. David is a professor at George Washington, and as you know, was ambassador to Ethiopia. And his comment was, I'm meeting you, and sorry that he couldn't be here, but he echoed the recent press release about, well, if al-Shabaab withdraws from Somalia, then that vacuum will be filled again with warlords and the clan structures that they manipulate to create the darkness that has governed Somalia for a long time. And there's a fear among the learned in this community or within Washington that fear a repeat, if you would, of the horrors of the early 90s. And then lastly, as a comment, and I know that you've had this discussion, whenever I talk to the oil companies that have declared force majeure on their properties in Somaliland, they worry, notwithstanding the border issue with Puntland, which, as you know, colors some of those properties, is that even if we were to go back in there, we would never be able to get insurance coverage on our operations. And secondly, what would prevent another government from trying to somehow renegotiate these rights? And then, thirdly, if we brought in a partner, what would the partner say? Because they might eventually be subject to a suit by the original holder. I mean, there's lots of complications here on the oil, which I get frustrated by, as I'm sure you do. So those are just some observations which you don't have to respond to.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. And just the point, if I can pick up the point of David Sheen about the warlords coming, it has happened last week. The Al-Shabaab has vacated many space within Mogadishu. That space has been, well, a couple of spaces have been taken already by warlords. Warlords are not in favor of peace and stability and security, and they don't want the TFG to succeed. So the TFG, it is very clear that they are so weak that they can't even capitalize on the recent achievements on the ground. So that's absolutely, Dave Sheen's assessment has already happened. I mean, we're seeing. And your comments on the CBA, yeah, that's right. One of the key objectives for the comprehensive peace agreement in Sudan was to make unity attractive first in 6 years. And if it doesn't become attractive, then it provided an opportunity for the people in South Sudan to have a referendum on whether they wanted to go alone. We think that Somaliland has been in a unity with Somalia from 1960 till 1990, which is 30 years. So we have given a unity, we have tried to make unity attractive. We sacrificed it a lot. It didn't become attractive. It became destructive. And then what we are saying now is, and we have a referendum in 2001 in Somaliland in which people were asking, do we really want to go alone, or do we still want to be? And overwhelmingly, the people in Somaliland said, no, we want to go alone. We want to be independent. So yes, I think Somaliland has had our own way of CBA. And there is no a country like North Sudan that we can talk to and negotiate about our exit because of the squabbles, because of the divisions, because of the different groups, Al-Shabaab, the TFG, the warlords are now coming, so many groups. You cannot pick and choose a group. That's what I want just as a comment on that.
Mr. Minister, if I can venture both a comment and then a follow with a question. I think one of the, I've having long been an advocate, as many in this room know, for Somaliland. I'm now convinced that part of the problem that Somaliland has is you're too good. You don't present problems. You keep your 500 miles of coast free of piracy, so we don't need to patrol there to keep pirates away. You're stable enough that we ship prisoners from Guantanamo to you because we wouldn't dare ship them to Mogadishu, and you, the former government, agreed to take these people when we couldn't find anywhere else to take them. You don't attack your neighbors. In fact, you do everything right so that you can be ignored. It's this squeaky wheel. It reminds me that I often think maybe Somaliland's salvation might be that movie, The Mouse That Roared. Maybe if you would declare war on us, and then we'll defeat you in 5 minutes, and then proceed to rebuild. But more seriously, I think one of the problems actually that Somaliland does face in this town and many other capitals is that people presume that since you've been so good for all 20 years now, things will always be the same, so we can take you for granted. We'll worry about the people in Mogadishu, since we're going to give them another year. The audits reveal that they stole 96% of their bilateral aid the last 2 years, so we're going to give them another year to improve upon that record, so to improve with greater efficiency. Maybe, could you comment on that? If we continue, the international community continues to ignore Somaliland, in the worst case scenario, which I certainly hope doesn't come to pass, that we continue to ignore, will things always remain the same? My suspicion is they won't, and that we're making a major mistake in the international community by simply taking you for granted for 20 years and thinking it will always be the same.
Absolutely, Peter. I agree with you. In fact, one of the key ideas I'm going to share, or have been sharing with Westerners here in the US, is you cannot take Somaliland stability for granted. We have been working on stability and security and democracy for over 20 years. That's because we are fully committed into promoting our position. But we were not going to be able to sustain those achievements alone. I think those achievements would have to be recognized and supported and defended. I don't think we will be able to do that alone. So this is a clear choice for the international community. We understand the focus on Mogadishu, but we don't think that has to be used as an excuse of ignoring Somaliland stability and security and democracy. So I agree with Peter. We cannot guarantee. I think this is a message that we are sending out to the international community, that we need to be taken serious, we need to be supported, and we need to be engaged and acknowledged. The question about the Somaliland being too nice. It's not a joke. I was told by the African Union that we cannot take your case to the Peace and Security Council in African Union because you are not at war with anyone. Somaliland has no intention, by the way, to cause trouble with anyone. So that's not what I think.
The advice we're giving that.
That's not what we are aiming to do. But it was given in a conference like this that we are too nice. But we think that behavior has to be acknowledged. We feel that has to be rewarded by both the African Union, but also by the Security Council.
If I can just follow up, just briefly, you're asking for engagement. As you have meetings around town, I realize this is your first visit as foreign minister to the Washington. What specific items, if there were 2 or 3 items that you would like to have from the United States in concrete terms, other than recognition, which unfortunately I don't think is going to come immediately, what are you asking for? What can we deliver realistically?
I think one of the concrete issues, which I think can be easily delivered, is the Security Council gets regular reports on Somalia. In fact, in a 2 days' time, the SRSG, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Somalia, will be delivering a speech or a report for the Security Council members. Often in those repeats, Somaliland doesn't get mentioned. Yet the UN Security Council thinks Somalia is one. They tend to believe that they believe the territorial integrity of Somalia. They acknowledge our progress and stability, but in those reports we don't get mentioned. We are asking the United States government and other friendly other countries to ensure that Somaliland's progress, stability, democracy, ambitions and plans, and the role that we can take in the region has to be reported on a regular basis, in the way that Somalia is gets reported for the Security Council. So that's one idea that we want to share with our friends and with the United States government. That's one thing. The other thing we would like to talk about is, if the international community continues asks us, why don't you talk to the TFG? Can you help? We would like to help, but we would like to be able to access to an international and regional conferences where the issue of the region, including Somalia, it gets discussed. So we would like the United States of government to help us to become a partner to the International Contact Group, for example, which is a group of countries led by, I think, US is one of the countries that leads that process to engage us. So we need to access international forums. We need to be invited for the UN Security Council briefings. So we will come and talk about Somaliland's progress and the role we can take in the regional security. Another issue is about piracy. Piracy, even though we don't produce pirates in Somaliland, we have been affected by the problem as a result of that. Where the United States government can engage us and think creatively with us about ways in which we can help America and other countries, but also help ourselves in reducing the risk posed by piracy in the region. So these are one of the ideas we would like to share with America.
Thank you. Ed Allen, IBTCI. To me, obviously, the dual track initiative has represented an important step forward. In what ways can the dual track be strengthened to benefit people who have been trying to live peacefully and to advance their own development?
As I said, dual track policy offers a new opportunity for Somaliland, but also stable areas in Somalia. But I think if the dual track policy would have meant an increased U.S. aid assistance to Somaliland, and if that assistance would be based on a bilateral assistance in a way that the Somaliland. I don't mean a budget support, cash coming from the USAID and going into the budget of Somaliland government, but if there were trust funds where those money put on, and Somaliland government would have a role to play in deciding which areas those money is going to be spent on, and which sectors those money is going to be spent. I think that would have been a good progress and a way forward for Somaliland. Another issue would be the security. We are expected to fight against piracy. We are expected to fight against terrorists in the region. But we are not allowed to develop our security sector. We don't actually share a lot of intelligence and information with America, with other countries. I hope that the dual track approach would facilitate those areas of cooperation. It would help us to train and develop our security sector, military and police. It will help us to get ships and boats in order to fight against pirates, and it will help us to have some military stuff that we can bring into Somaliland in order to defend ourselves against terrorists.
Dr. Omar, Steve Evans again from Marine Corps University Press. One comment on the terminology, though. I guess it's part of just the way the general population sees Somalia. I mean, no one refers to the Soviet Union anymore. No one refers to Yugoslavia, which broke up at the same time that Somalia did. So, I mean, I don't know what you can do about that, but I mean, you have three successor states, Somaliland, Puntland, and South Central Somalia. So I don't know if you can, as part of the dual track policy, insist that we call you Somaliland. But in any event, my question is, as part of the dual track policy, do you have any interaction whatsoever with the Combined Joint Task Force, Horn of Africa, that's in Djibouti? Do they offer at least training of forces or anything? They're right next door, and it's a short trip.
I think the short answer is no. We don't have that cooperation at all. I know the Pentagon is actually in favor of working with Somaliland. Not an official document, but I have heard of that. But I think it's the State Department that's standing in the way, if I'm honest. But we need to talk about that. But we don't have that cooperation at the moment, no.
One question related to the Puntland, South Central, or TFG issue. I mean, your aspirations are independence. Your aspirations are for recognition, but without the TFG or something that will come of the TFG or something in the future, and Puntland. I mean, would you be encouraged to have more official contact with each of those entities? Would your government welcome more official meetings and cooperation on a regular basis? I mean, you're talking about being included in more of the conversation. Obviously, the TFG is very much included in the conversation since they're the official entity. I mean, would you welcome more of the official inclusion of meetings with the TFG and Puntland?
Ideally, we would like to have more cooperation with the TFG and Puntland. By the way, Puntland is not seeking for independence. It is a region which is part of Somalia. They see their future within the Somali political configuration. We do have actually a cooperation at the moment with TFG in a number of issues. One of the issues is Kampala process. We all put Somaliland and Somalia are part of the Kampala process. Kampala process is a regional framework whereby experiences and policies about anti-piracy activities are shared. And those processes is led by Britain and other countries. And we come, the Somaliland ministers and our officers regularly attend the Kampala process, and TFG comes as well. So we have that level of cooperation. But I think that's it. But we have an ideas about how we can cooperate with TFG in the future about trade relationships. We would like to have a tariffs set with the TFG in order to promote movement of trade and people. But it's very difficult. The TFG has no control on Somalia. They don't control beyond Mogadishu. I mean, they are controlling now Mogadishu for the first time in many, many years. So that's not possible, but we would like to cooperate with the TFG a lot more than that.
An interesting irony in all this is that although we, as the United States government, do a lot of engagement with the TFG, our legal position as the United States government is we don't recognize them as the government of Somalia. And we have that in plain black letter now, finally, from when she was Solicitor General, Elaine Kagan, and Professor Harold Koh. The legal position of the U.S. is no one is sovereign, but we'll still talk more to one another. So we're in a policy bind there that I think we need to sort out internally to move to a better place. I think if there are no other questions, thank the minister for an extraordinary openness and willingness to engage everyone here. I think everyone comes away knowing more about Somaliland, knowing about its contributions to the region and to the dynamics, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll have you back again, and hopefully in at least a greater level of engagement has carried out, and hopefully that some of that begins here. So thank you again for your time and for your attention.
Thank you very much.